Mr. Chairman, we're live.
We'll call this meeting to session. This is your Corporations Committee meeting. And if we could please take the roll.
Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Locke,
Present.
Representative Heft.
Here.
Representative Johnson,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Present.
Representative Webb,
Here.
Representative Weber,
Here.
Representative Yin,
Here.
Chairman Knapp.
Here. All right. First off, we're going to have a presentation and we'll introduce the National Council of Insurance Legislators. Welcome. If you guys can approach and we'll get your slideshow ready. But if you could please introduce yourselves for the committee and for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Will Malofchik on behalf of the National Council of Insurance Legislators.
I'm Pat Gilbert, also on behalf of the National Council of Insurance Legislators.
I'm sorry, didn't catch your name.
Pat Gilbert.
Usually that's my name. Someone's asking second questions with Malofchik. That's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't think you want to see how I spelled it. All right, gentlemen, if you can introduce your organization, and then if we're all queued up, start your presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here all the way from beautiful, lovely New Jersey. So we were greeted with a snowstorm here in Wyoming, but we're making the best of it and we're enjoying our time here. The purpose of our visit here today is to just provide a brief presentation on NCOIL, tell you a little bit about it if you're not familiar with it, and really to encourage legislative participation at the organization going forward. So NCOIL is a national bipartisan legislative organization, and it's represented principally by legislators such as yourselves who preside on their state's committee with jurisdiction over insurance issues. And what makes NCOIL unique is that we're the only organization that is comprised of legislators that develops model laws in insurance. So when you combine all those things together, an organization comprised of insurance legislators that develops model laws in insurance, that's what sets us apart from other organizations you may have heard, such as NCSL, NAIC, CSG. So that's what makes NCOIL unique. And many of our model laws have been adopted by several states all across the country, some by almost every state. For instance, several years ago, when Uber and Lyft, those technologies came into our lives, insurance frameworks had to be developed and set up to make sure consumers were protected and that the businesses were able to operate accordingly. So the NCOIL model law, what we call the Transportation Network Company model, TNC for short, that's been adopted by almost every state. And then similarly, during COVID, you probably utilized a lot of DoorDash services or Uber Eats or things of that nature. So those things were new during COVID. And similarly, insurance frameworks for those systems had to be developed. And our model law is making its way through state legislatures as well. And that's a kind of a newer issue that the organization has worked on. And NCOIL's mission is primarily two things. It's to preserve the state-based system of insurance regulation, which was set forth by something called the McCarran-Ferguson Act from Congress back in the 1940s, which we'll discuss just in a few minutes. And then we exist to educate public policymakers such as yourselves again, legislators on their insurance committees. So when you come to our meetings, you're educated on the timely and important insurance issues. When you return back to your legislatures, you have the most knowledge necessary to work on your legislation. So if we can just fast forward the slides a few, please. One more. Thank you. So just a couple remarks about NCOIL's structure. So all 50 states are members of NCOIL. Anyone can participate at NCOIL at any time, but about 35 states are what we call contributing member states. And what that means is those states pay NCOIL annual financial dues of $20,000. And with that membership status comes certain benefits to those legislators and also to the states. And for the legislators, if you're from a contributing member state, you're eligible to serve as an NCOIL officer or a NCOIL committee chair. And then also, we have a policy of only holding our meetings in states that are contributing member states. And just to take a second to talk about state membership, is really when you think about the return on investment for a state becoming a contributing member state to NCOIL, for $20,000, almost half of that money is actually eligible towards reimbursing legislators' travel expenses to come to our national meetings. And then we have, as I mentioned, we have a policy of only holding our meetings in contributing member states. And when you think about the economic activity of numerous interested parties, consumer advocates, hundreds of people coming to a state, when you think about the economic activity generated all for $20,000, the ROI there is pretty tremendous, especially when you compare it to other organizations such as NCSL, which is a great organization, but their dues payments are exponentially higher than ours. And we have 7 policy committees broken down by each line of insurance. So we have a health insurance committee, life insurance, property and casualty, and the members of those committees are state legislators like yourselves who preside on state insurance committees. And the meetings that I mentioned, we have 3 national meetings across the country per year. We have our spring in April, summer in July, and our annual meeting in November. For this year, we'll be in Charleston, South Carolina, Chicago, and also Atlanta. And then we also, outside of our national meetings, we have some smaller regional meetings as well, which is something we'd like to hopefully discuss afterwards about having either a national meeting or perhaps a regional meeting here in Jackson Hole. Several of our members have indicated that they would love to come to that location. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a little bit about our membership. So when you come to our meetings, they typically average anywhere from 300 to 375 total attendees. And of that number, we usually average about 60 legislators from about 30 states. We also average about anywhere from about 5 to 8 insurance commissioners as well as insurance department staff and legislative staff as well. And right now is a great time to be involved in the organization. We're really on an upswing. And the best number to illustrate that is last year, throughout the course of our 3 meetings, we had 137 legislators from 41 states attend our meetings. So that's illustrative of how national NCOIL is and the different perspectives that you'll hear when you come to our meetings. Next slide, please. And here are just about a handful of issues that the organization is currently working on or recently just wrapped up. I won't go into each one of these. I'll just comment on a couple. In light of I think it's timely to just discuss a couple of things on the P&C side in light of everything that's gone on in California with the wildfires and inclement weather here with the snow. We're developing a model law currently in our Property and Casualty Insurance Committee that deals with insurers' use of aerial images in making claims and coverage determinations. And the way this came about is some of our member legislators were getting complaints from their constituents where their homeowners policies were either being canceled or non-renewed based on an image, an aerial image that was either just flat out wrong, it was from the wrong house, or it was severely outdated. And the homeowners, they had no recourse, even though they had proof to say that, well, this picture that you took is of a different house, or it's from 5 years ago. Since that time, I've fixed the roof or I've fixed some conditions around the property. So the model that we're working on at least sets forth some parameters in a process that the homeowner can follow in terms of submitting proof to the insurer to show them that the picture was wrong, and that then that provides them an opportunity to cure any defects that may be existing on the property so that their policy won't be canceled or non-renewed. And then also on the mitigation side of things, we've recently just wrapped up a couple of initiatives, one being one following an approach that several states have followed, which is state insurance departments have set up grant programs where consumers can apply for a grant, typically of about $10,000, and they can either retrofit or build a new roof on top of their home that complies with certain standards. And these standards are developed by what's called the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. And then if the homeowner gets the grant, puts on the new roof, then the insurer in those states then is required to recognize that improvement and then provide the policyholder with a premium discount as well. So that's something that several states have followed, and that we just recently adopted our model law, which is now making its way through the states as well. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to do here is just spend just a couple minutes on just providing a little bit of history on insurance in general, just so there's a little bit of context of how we're here today and how organizations like NCOIL and the NAIC are structured and what they follow. So, insurance is one of kind of the rare industries that now is still predominantly regulated at the state level. And the way that came about was there was a Supreme Court case in 1869, Paul v. Virginia, that actually said insurance was not commerce, so it wasn't subject to federal regulation under the Commerce Clause, which kind of strains logic a little bit. And what happened was in the 1940s, another Supreme Court case essentially overruled that decision and said insurance is commerce, it's subject to federal regulation. But however, if you think about that time frame in 1944, the country was, particularly Congress, was experiencing a lot of things, most notably World War II. And they said, well, we don't think we can respond to this Supreme Court decision and develop a completely new federal system to regulate insurance. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass the what's called the McCarran-Ferguson Act, which essentially delegates the regulation of insurance to the states. Now, it's important to recognize, you may be thinking, well, what about things like the Affordable Care Act or other federal actions in the insurance space? So what McCarran-Ferguson says is, Congress at any time can step in and pass a law related to insurance. But in all other instances, if Congress doesn't do that, if they're silent on insurance, then everything is left to the states. So if you ever hear about instances where states are pushing back on federal encroachment of insurance, it's instances where Congress has not enacted any laws related to insurance, but you might have certain federal agencies looking to promulgate regulations without any explicit statutory authority to do so. And that would be something that would be viewed as not only unnecessary, but unlawful encroachment pursuant to the McCarran-Ferguson Act. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to today, which, again, the state system has worked well, and really the states handle mostly all of insurance regulation, whether it's financing, investment, as you see, insurance formation and taxing. And a lot of that is developed by, I mentioned the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. It's a great organization. We work very closely with them. They also develop model laws and regulations, but as the name indicates, insurance commissioners, they're inherently a regulatory organization comprised of insurance commissioners and insurance department staff. Whereas NCOIL, our members are legislators, and we've worked with the NAIC closely to try and kind of split it to where NCOIL develops model laws as we're a legislative organization, and the NAIC develops model regulations as a regulatory organization. Next slide, please. And this is just one last example that I'd like to mention about federal, what we think is intrusion into the state-based system. And I'm sure many of you have dealt with this issue before, and this relates to ERISA. So ERISA, as you know, it preempts self-funded plans. So what that means is if a state legislature, if you want to enact a piece of healthcare reform, so let's just say, for example, if you wanted to implement a health insurance mandate, the problem is that as currently crafted, that piece of legislation is only going to impact a tiny sliver of your state's population because, as the numbers up there show, as of 2019, over 60% of the country's population has coverage through self-funded plans. And that number has probably risen in the past 5 years. So what NCOIL has advocated for is actually a waiver process where states could apply to federal agencies like the Department of Labor or Health and Human Services. And this is similar to waivers that already exist for things like the Affordable Care Act, like 1332 waivers and 1115 waivers, where if a state wanted to enact a piece of healthcare reform legislation, they could apply for a waiver and they would have that piece of legislation apply to an entire state's population. And we've been reaching out to Congress, and Congressman Sessions of Texas actually has expressed interest in this. We do think it's likely he'll introduce this shortly. And the last slide is really just an example of just other actions from federal agencies that we view as encroaching on the state-based system. You'll have these slides available afterwards, but I'll just stop there and just close by saying, we encourage Wyoming participation at NCOIL. We think it benefits our members to hear your perspectives, and we think it benefits you to hear from other state perspectives as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And just so the committee knows, you've presented also to the Senate corporations. Was that this morning?
Yes, this morning to the Senate Corporations Committee.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for the information. I take it that is Wyoming a contributing member state?
Wyoming is not,
Okay.
which is part of the reason why we're here. We'd like to encourage membership, again, not only for just legislative participation at our organization, but we'd love to have a meeting here. It's a location that a lot of our members have requested. So we think it would be a great benefit to not only the state, but also to legislators like yourselves and our organization as well.
Follow up?
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And did I hear you say that you will be sending the slides to us?
Yes,
Thank you. That would be great.
sure.
So as it stands now, you've got contributing members. You said there's 35 states. Would Wyoming be considered just a general participating member if we weren't a member?
Right. So again, all 50 states are members of NCOIL, but then the states that do pay dues are contributing members. And that doesn't, if you're not a contributing member, it doesn't preclude you in any way from participating in NCOIL. But there are those added benefits if you are a legislator from a contributing member state, like expanded reimbursement opportunities for coming to our meetings, the chance to be a committee chair or run for an officer position, and then the meeting locations, as I mentioned as well.
Do you think your uptick in participation in the contributing member states is due to the environment right now with insurance, where you've got natural disasters occurring everywhere and some coverage slips and things like that?
I do. I said this before, earlier this morning to the Senate committee. In a way, it's good for us because there's so much for us to talk about at our meetings. And we've had a lot of that where insurance legislators will just reach out and say, hey, I'm hearing a lot of complaints or just questions from my constituencies about insurance issues. I don't know much about it. I'd like to learn more. I've heard NCOIL is a good resource. And oftentimes you'll get those legislators come to one meeting, they'll like it, they'll keep on coming back. And in the case of states that do have term limits, they'll pass it on to newer legislators, saying that you should get involved with NCOIL. So that is a process that we've seen.
Any other questions? And what would be Wyoming's next step if we did decide we would like to participate as a member, contributing member? What would be our next step?
So there's different ways that the dues payments can be made. Some states actually pay it through, even though we're a legislative organization, some states pay it through the insurance department, because insurance department, the logic is that they would like their insurance legislators to be best educated on insurance issues. The other states that do pay through the legislature, some states split it through each chamber, half from the Senate, half from the House. Some states just have it carved into the budget via line item. There's different mechanisms that it can be paid.
I believe Minority Leader Yin did bring his checkbook today, so.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, the way we pay member dues to the member organizations that we do pay dues to, so NCSL and CSG, that is through the legislative feed bill. And so that's just the legislative budget. I think the insurance department idea is an interesting one, so maybe that could be something we explore.
In Minority Leader Yin, is it typically the management council that would decide on memberships?
So the management council drafts the legislative budget bill, and then that comes to the floor like any other bill to get debated.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Well, we appreciate you weathering the storm to come inform us for sure. I know you probably had weather back at home too, but this was a interesting cold spell to come over for, so thank you.
No, thank you. We're happy to do it. It was a pleasure, and we hope to be in touch soon. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, committee, next up is SF 46, Water and Sewer Districts bid requirements. Senator Landon, welcome. Welcome, Senator. If you could introduce yourself for the committee and the record, and we'll get an explanation of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Landon, Senate District 27. We go back up the river a ways together. We've been on some committees, and I'm a fellow Corporations Committee member, so I look forward to working with all of you in the coming weeks. It's a great committee. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to bring you Senate File 46, which came to us late in the fall. This was a bill that actually was requested by one of our constituent groups, which testifies in front of corporations quite often, and that is our water and sewer districts out there. And it came so late in the interim that I indicated I'd be happy to pick up the issue that was expressed to us. You might remember that. And once the bill was drafted, sent it to some of the members, in fact, all the members of the Corporations Committee of the previous 2 years, and that's the co-sponsors that you see on the bill. So, Mr. Chairman, just to quickly give you a little background on this, it was 2023 session that the Corporations Committee ran a bill and raised the municipality bid limits to $75,000 from $30,000. Those had not been changed. I've got a confirm this, and I'm sorry I don't know it off the top of my head. I believe it went back about 15 or 20 years since we had changed the statutes. At any rate, those bid limits were raised to $75,000. The special districts were left out of that opportunity. So at the time, we kind of believed that all those bid limits for the political subdivisions of the state, including these special districts, would be included, and they were not. That bill went through just with the municipalities. So that's why, Mr. Chairman, we've seen two different bills. Irrigation districts, now the water and sewer districts have come forward to request an equal playing surface. It really, when you think about it, it makes sense. The legislature, by passing this, I think would help with the speed and with the administrative burden that it puts on these little smaller districts, quite frankly. Some of these water and sewer districts don't have a lot of folks around. Speed's a factor in much of what they do, and having to prepare these bid documents, advertise for bids, evaluate, create contracts for a line break or a valve replacement. You can see where that would work itself well into a construction season, for example. Raising this bid limit would just simply put our rural little districts on a par with our municipality, which I think would be a good thing to do. We tried, by the way, Mr. Chairman, in '24 to get this involved in the budget. I think you were part of that, to kind of at least take a look. And it was really put on the shelf for interim work. Unfortunately, this past interim, we just, as a corporations committee, did not get to it until that third meeting. It came in pretty late. And that's kind of the background on the bill. It's very simple, Mr. Chairman. The language comes into Romanet 11 under Section 113, the powers of a district board out across. And then there's a little bit of cleanup language on page 4. I hope that gives you enough of a background, Mr. Chairman. That's the bill, and would be glad to try to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions of the committee? Senator, I had one. So is this the same for counties as well as municipalities? Is that the level that's at?
Yes, it is, 75,000, and, the more that we talked about this, Mr. Chairman, the more committed I was to at least get this back in front of us for consideration, because all of us know what the cost of pipe and valves and all of these things going on out across there. Anything we can do to expedite for our small districts just makes a lot of sense to me. And plus, quite frankly, it's a fairness issue when you come right down to it. Why would we do this for the municipalities and not for our districts often who represent, the rural parts of our state? So.
And very often districts are right outside the city too, so.
There you go. Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Representative Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you so much for being with us today. Would you say that the prevalence of low-dollar bids, of low-dollar jobs like this are more common than the high-dollar ones? And let's just use 75,000 as a marker for small versus
Senator
large.
Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Representative, thank you. That's a great question, and it hasn't come up in that way. So I would probably have to defer and get back to you on that with our folks that represent these districts, and I'd be glad to do that. There are a lot of bids, quite frankly, that come in well below the 75,000 figure. And that's why I think there was some urgency by the gentleman who represents all of these districts to say, we really do need to give them some consideration, because it's just so time consuming, such an administrative burden to get out across with the bids, get them advertised, You know, I think something that was testified to in our committee that really hit home for me is that this is not going to prohibit them from shopping these. You know, these districts, they're doing everything they can to save money on behalf of their members. And so they're absolutely gonna do everything except have to advertise a formal bid. So, but I'll be glad to chase that down, Mr. Chairman, and sorry I don't have the answer today. A lot of these projects are becoming very expensive though. Products are just shooting through the roof out there.
And I think what drives us too is a lot of time-sensitive work with water and sewer districts. You've got regular maintenance that's becoming expensive. And so I think they would like to have that time-sensitive work be able to be done as quickly as possible to repair something.
That's absolutely a very good point, Mr. Chairman, and I think that is important to them. And you know, our construction seasons are so short to begin with that I think any help we can give them is gonna be appreciated. So,
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
thank you very much.
Is there anybody here to speak on this topic? From the public, from agencies, organizations, anybody online?
Mr. Chairman, we have one individual online, Mark Pepper. I can
Oh.
admit him now.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Mr. Pepper. How are you?
I'm here. Thank you. Trying to stay warm.
If you can identify yourself and then give testimony to this bill.
Sure. My name's Mark Pepper. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Rural Water Systems. On and for the bill today, Senator Landon did a very good job of laying it out. I'm here representing the roughly 200 plus special districts that own and operate water and wastewater facilities statewide. And as Senator Landon mentioned, we did think back in 23 that the bill that was passed for the municipalities included political subdivisions. So that was kind of a reason why we've kind of continued to bring this forward. As he indicated, a lot of the repair jobs in special districts today are very similar to municipalities in that they're in that 30 to 75 range. Pretty much normal expansion, maybe just putting in 200 feet of pipe and a couple valves and meter pits could easily exceed the 30,000 range, but would be underneath the 75. And it is a speed factor. It's a flexibility is also allows us to talk to 3 or 4 different contractors to see if they have the ability to perform the needed repair or service. So it's just one of those that, and keeping in mind that while a lot of our special districts are small, 92% of all of the community water systems in the state of Wyoming serve populations under 500. So you throw in some of the municipalities, Manderson, Manville, Chugwater, Burns, a lot of those are in that same category. So this is a matter of fairness, a matter of flexibility, cost effectiveness in being able to address these in a timely manner. And it's still, once we start exceeding the 75,000 threshold, those are projects that are thought out, planned for, and go through that bid process. But at a 30,000 range, the bid process just adds a a bureaucratic layer of cost more than anything. You're looking at the delay time and putting a bid spec together, pre-bid meetings, advertising the bid, that's a cost involved in all of that. And one last thing I'll leave you with, and then be more than happy to address any questions. And to address the question that came up earlier, a lot of these projects are in the 30 to 75 range in just the normal day-to-day activity. But as Senator Landon also indicated, the boards that are in charge of these districts are very frugal because anything they do directly affects them and their neighbors. It is, special districts are special purpose by nature. So if they're going to spend any money on the district's needs, it directly affects them and their neighbors and no one else. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Well, thank you, Mr. Pepper. You've definitely convinced us. I'm a Pepper. You're a Pepper.
I'll hold you to that.
Thank you very much for testifying today.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Representative Johnson and seconded by Representative Brown. Any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Minority Leader Yin.
I have one question for the sponsor real quick, if I may. Senator Landon, so you know that during the interim, we had basically it spawned the reason for this bill, the irrigation districts bid requirements bill. That bill actually died for lack of a hearing. Would you be opposed to because it was the same bid requirement number, the 75,000 value, would you be okay with putting that in this bill as well, or you think this bill should stand alone?
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative. I would not have any heartburn with that at all. The testimony we received, and we kind of thought that bill had enough life that it might be considered. It's just one of those things that it fell off the table. So I wouldn't have any problem if the Corporations Committee on this side feels like we should take care of all the small districts out there. It certainly makes sense to me.
Follow up?
So, Mr. Chairman, yeah, so the question was about irrigation districts. So we had House Bill 70, which was a Corporations Committee bill about irrigation districts and upping their bid requirement to 75,000. And that's what spawned the conversation about this bill, where it didn't have time to get the Corporations Committee sponsorship. But the irrigation districts bill didn't get out of the speaker's drawer. And so I think it would fit handily in this bill as well, just to get everyone on an even playing field, the irrigation districts, the water and sewer districts, and our municipality.
Minority Leader Yin, would you offer that up as an amendment then?
Mr. Chairman, sure, yeah, I'll move that amendment to bring in House Bill 70, or just the bid requirement portion. So it's 417412, and to bring in that 75K requirement in for them as well, to put them on an even playing field.
And would you recommend a title change as well?
Yeah, I think it would need a slight title change to make that happen, but whatever conforming amendments LSO thinks is necessary for it.
All right, is there a second to that amendment? First, I'm going to take the amendment. Is there a second? Okay. Representative Webb is a second. Yes, discussion on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Minority Leader Yin, was that House Bill 70, is that this session, or was this a previous session?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lucas, it was this session, so it was an interim corporation-sponsored bill.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might,
Yes, Senator.
thank you very much, and thanks for catching, the concern under the title. I sure don't want to jeopardize, either the irrigation districts or the water and sewer districts. So if you feel like we can change the title, we can certainly do that to cover all of this. It would probably be good corporations' work to get everyone taken care of at the same time, but we don't want to run afoul of the one title, one topic sort of thing, so,
All right.
yeah.
We'll have LSO make that recommendation in the title change as well, so. All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That amendment does carry. Thank you, Representative Yin. Any other amendments to the bill? With that, I will ask for a roll. For Bill SF 46, Water and Sewer Districts bid requirements as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote for Senate File 46, Water and Sewer Districts Bid Requirements. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Heft. Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Representative Locke submitted an absentee vote of aye. Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
All right, with that, Senate File 46 as amended does pass. Minority Leader Yin, you are a co-sponsor on that. Would you like to manage that on the floor?
Mr. Chairman, sure, I can do
Thank you. Thank you, and good to see you again, Senator. Okay, next up, we have Senate File 56, providing false information to registered agents. Do we have anybody here to sponsor this? Secretary of State, we're working on Senate File 56, and if I could just have you, since this was sponsored by joint corporations, could I just have you an explanation of the bill? Explanation. All right, please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. To my left is our General Counsel, Policy Director Joe Rubino. To my right is Business Division Director Colin Crossman. This bill, Senate File 56, is a committee bill. It came out of the Business Fraud Working Group, which we were very pleased to be members of. Thank you to the Joint Committee for convening that. It was one of the requests that we had as part of that group. There were, I believe, 5 bills, maybe 4 that came out of that group. All but one were requests that we had made and the committee took up. And so this is one of them. And it adds to the grounds for dissolution, providing false information to a registered agent. So you see there sort of the follow through in the bill on page 2, going into page 3. That's our dissolution authority on corporations. Subsection D has provided false or fraudulent information to the registered agent as determined by the Secretary of State during or following an examination of records pursuant to 17-28-108 or following notification by the registered agent. So that's cross-referencing the audit authority and also upon request from the registered agent. And so it's tracking into all of our dissolution authority that provision, and that's what we do. 17-16-1420 is for-profit domestic corporations. 17-16-1530 on pages 3 and 4 is for-profit foreign corporations. Again, foreign is anything that's not within state lines. And then 17-19-1420 is nonprofit. Domestic corporations, 17-19-1530, nonprofit foreign corporations, 17-29-705, we're on page 6, domestic LLCs, and page 7, 17-30-904, foreign LLCs, and that goes into page 8. So you're basically tracking in that language across all of our dissolution authority, across all the different entity types. So that's what the bill does.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Representative Lucas? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr.
Throwing your
Chairman.
voice down there.
Thank you for being here, Secretary of State Gray. My question is what kind of things have you seen come through the state of Wyoming that were fraudulent?
Well, thank you, Mr.
Secretary Gray?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Weber. The one that was a big ticket issue that made national news was an entity tied to a series of entities tied to North Korea that we dissolved last year that appeared to be involved in funding their weapons program. We dissolved those entities. We took on North Korea and we won. We dissolved those entities. We were the first state that had entities that the FBI had identified that dissolved them. And then we've had a lot of address issues. We have really activated this dissolution authority that exists in state law. And obviously you're amending in this subsection for if somebody is giving false information to the registered agent, that's an authority for us to dissolve. There really are not a lot of records of my predecessors dissolving entities and using the dissolution authority in Title 17. And one of the first things we did is we decided to really activate the use of that dissolution authority. So we have a procedure now for getting information when that is brought to our office, complaints, and a lot of them have to do with false addressing. I think I'll ask Mr. Crossman to add a little more color. I think we're in the 60s now of entities dissolved. I continue to encourage the assessors and the treasurers to give us information and to collaborate with our office. I sent letters to both of those entities, the Assessors Association and the Treasurers Association, in 2024 when they came to the Joint Corporations Committee and said that they had identified some fraud. And I was very disturbed because they had not notified my office of that. And so I sent them a letter saying, look, you need to notify us of this and then we can dissolve these entities. And I'm really hoping that they continue to engage and expand in their relationship with us. Mr. Crossman, anything you want to add on what you've seen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead and identify
Yes,
yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colin Crossman, Director of the Business Division. What we have seen so far is we've used our dissolution authority to dissolve entities when mostly under, and I'll just pick one on page 7 of the bill, look at lines 4 through 7, which discusses has provided false information or failed to correct false information on the request of the Secretary of State on any filing with the Secretary of State under this chapter. So that is the power we have been using, and that extends, for instance, when an entity has placed a false address on our filing with us or used a false registered agent or something else like that. That is powerful enough to get at some of these, but in the case of the North Korean entities that the Secretary referenced, they had done that. But there are other entities that where all of the information provided on documents given to us, as that section requires, is correct, or at least non-objectionable or not false, or there is no way for us to determine that falsity. So I could not potentially dissolve entities under that power. So what this provision does in D below, on that same page, which as the Secretary mentioned is referenced throughout, allows us to use our audit authority, which we already have. That's an explicit authority that we have to audit the commercial registered agents to get information on a targeted entity that they have to keep on file and determine if anything that was given to that agent is false or fraudulent, and then use that as a jumping off point. Right now, the statute does contemplate us, if we determine that there is something that is provided to the registered agent that is not accurate, we theoretically could fine the entity $2,000. Well, if they're a false or fraudulent entity and they don't exist, and if they don't pay, what happens? So this actually provides us with a bit more authority. So for instance, if the situation had arisen where the FBI had said these entities are North Korean entities and they had done everything correctly in our office, but we had found that they had provided a false address to their registered agent, without this, we would still be unable to do anything. This gives us that authority to look into it. It also specifically allows the registered agent, if they determine on their own motion that there is something squirrely in their records, they can report it to us. It doesn't require them to do so, but if they do so, we then can effectively exercise this power as well. But the way I see it playing out most commonly is that we have some complaint by a citizen that an entity has been formed, and we are proactively auditing that entity, finding out that there's something in that entity's filing at the registered agent that is false or fraudulent, and then utilizing this, and then putting it into our current existing protocol.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Crossman. To follow up, have you had any cases where people were saying, oh, this other entity is in competition with me, and I report it to you to kind of have you guys be the watchdog or sick on them for any reason?
Mr. Crossman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that has happened. I can think of one example, although I mean, I'll take the example and modify it a little bit. It wasn't in competition. There was a situation where an individual, okay, there's two situations where individuals had attempted to dissolve someone's entity, and I would say the allegation for dissolution was itself false. Both cases, our procedure is such that we take in the information. They have to provide this information on a sworn affidavit, first of all. So the person giving us the information has to give us a sworn affidavit, which at least allows us that if it's a severe enough problem that we could theoretically pursue that person for perjury in our office. So the person providing it has to, it's a higher level than, we don't accept an email or a phone call. It has to be a sworn affidavit. And then the entity that is under risk of dissolution has 60 days to provide us with proof that it's either not fraudulent or false, or there is a reasonable, innocent explanation to our satisfaction. And there have been, as I said, I believe 2 cases where I have reversed myself, or we have reversed our decision based on the entity itself coming back with, in one case, it was the address number was transposed. Totally innocent. After a little bit of investigation, made complete sense. In the other case, it was a ex-spouse attempting to damage the business of the other party. And in both cases, I was presented with rather compelling evidence that there was nothing going on. We rescinded it, and in those cases where it has been rescinded, the administrative action is removed from the public part of the public records. And by that I mean removed from the website. It's still a part of the public record. It can still be theoretically requested, but it's not out on the website. So the entity doesn't have a, you were being investigated. So.
All right. I had a question. So that's quite a few, 60 entities dissolved. In what time period has that been?
Mr. Chairman, we really started this procedure in May of '23, really ramped up in '24 after the testimony from, after the Lander meeting. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds like the investigations are very thorough, so.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
Any other questions?
And Mr. Chairman, one thing, I hope with your indulgence, I mean, this is one of the reasons why, in terms of positions for our office, I mean, we're trying to ramp these up, and we have 11 people, we have 75% of the work of Delaware and 10% of the staff, and really appreciate the House defending our position on this. This is one of the things we're trying to expand is taking on the fraud, which does take staff time.
All right, thank you. Representative Lucas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, always a pleasure. So I'm thinking I'm a little rusty on registered agents. Do these organizations have to file any type of attestation with the registered agent? Or is there any onus on the registered agent to do any kind of checking? I mean, I've been a registered agent for nonprofits and, I don't have that kind of resource to do it, but I know that there are registered agents who represent more than one organization, 10 or more and so on, quite a few. Just curious about that.
Mr. Crossland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So commercial registered agents do have to file with us anyway, a higher level. So any individual can be a registered agent with up to 10. And after you hit 10, you have to become a commercial registered agent. And then you're filing a sworn statement with us attesting to a series of aspects, such as you're going to be available during office hours and that you're taking on the burden, all that sort of thing. As to what the commercial registered agent has to do with respect to each entity, no, it is not. There is not a burden placed on the commercial registered agent itself. They have to have the information, but they do not have a burden to delve into it beyond what the entity has provided it. They are effectively empowered to trust the entity to be honest with them. Now, if we have had situations where the registered agents have come to us and said, we're concerned about this entity or that entity, and some registered agents do some form of checking on their own for their own liability protection, but as to a specific requirement, no, they do not have that.
Follow up? All right, thank you. Did you have one more comment?
I do have one more point that I'd like to mention. And so if this body does like this bill, one of the elements to mention is that on page 8. Oh, sorry.
We're going to do that. We're just presenting the bill. We'd like to change the effective date. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
You can comment too
Okay.
now as your office.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in my office at this moment, I have, I'll say, at least 2 entity situations that would benefit immediately from this bill being effective. And right now, the effective date is July 1st. So it would be very beneficial, at least for those 2 situations, for this to become effective upon all of the acts of enactment. And I don't believe that would be a burden on either the registered agents or our office. I've already been presented with the information. I've already done the investigation. As part of that, I did audit the CRA for these entities. I already am aware of the situations that would qualify under this. So there would be no, I don't believe, any burden on the public or any other entity for if this were to become active immediately. I could just solve these 2, I guess, constituents issues sooner than July.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Secretary Gray.
could we go ahead and just make a few comments on it?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're very excited about this bill draft, which would add another tool to our toolkit in both identifying and taking action to administratively dissolve business entities if we're notified that the business entity has provided false or fraudulent information to its registered agent. From a high level, I think this bill is not only necessary, but in our conversations with some commercial registered agents throughout the interim, including Scott Meyer, who participated in the Business Fraud Working Group, I think it's something that would be highly beneficial to the registered agent community. As a little background, business entities that employ a registered agent are required to provide their registered agent certain contact information, which may be audited by our office. Under our administration, our office has increased these audits of commercial registered agents, checking for compliance by the commercial registered agent in keeping this information. However, our office does not have power currently to take any action against the underlying entity if the underlying entity is providing false or fraudulent information to the registered agent to begin with. And that's what we're attempting to change with the bill. Essentially, the trigger for administrative dissolution would occur in two instances. One, during an audit of a commercial registered agent, if we determine that an entity has filed false or fraudulent information to the registered agent, or the second instance would be if we're notified by the registered agent that a business entity has filed false or fraudulent information with the registered agent. This bill does not have any direct fiscal impact on our office because it essentially fits into our existing dissolution process, but would be utilized by our business division to ensure the integrity of documents filed with our office and that may be audited by our office. As Mr. Crossman mentioned, you're going to be hearing a couple other bills from the Business Fraud Working Group and have heard a couple that originate in the House side. One of those that probably will be heard, if it is heard by the committee, does have some implementation factor, but this one, we believe if it's effective immediately, would be really helpful in terms of taking on fraud. The other one needs a little time for us to implement it, that third-party filer bill, but this one, I think making it effective immediately would be really helpful. Thank you. We're very in support of Senate File 56.
Any questions? Mr. Urbino, do you have anything to add? Blink twice if he's not allowing you to talk. All right. Any other questions? Okay, actually, let's take some public testimony. Is there anybody here for this particular bill? Anybody online?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Any agencies, representatives? Nobody? Okay. With that, I will close public testimony. What is the pleasure of the committee? All right, Representative Weber with the motion and Representative Brown with the second. All right. Are there any amendments to the bill?
Yes, I have one.
Representative Weber.
On page 8, line 20, after the word effective, add the word immediately, and then delete July 1, 2025.
All right, is there a second? Representative Lucas? All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, any other amendments? Seeing that, will you please poll for Senate File number 56, providing false information to registered agents?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote for Senate File 56, providing false information to registered agents. Representative Brown?
Aye.
Representative Locke?
Aye.
Representative Heft?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Johnson?
Aye.
Representative Lucas?
Aye.
Representative Webb?
Aye.
Representative Weber?
Aye.
Representative Yin?
Aye.
Chairman Knapp?
Aye.
Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
With that, Senate File number 56 does pass the committee. Could I get a volunteer to work this on the floor? Representative Weber,
With help.
with help. Anybody else want to be the second? Representative Lucas? Okay. All right, is there anything else to come before the committee? Nothing. With that, we are adjourned.
46 turn out.
We